Hi, this is Shashi Prabhakar, Director of Partner Solution Architect at AWS, and with me we have Mike Morris, CTO of AWS Premier Partner Effectual. We are here to talk about migrating VMware workloads to native AWS services. Mike, can you share how Effectual was able to meet our customers' business outcome on a tight timeline?
Yeah, absolutely. So the customer in this case is a large customer in the real estate industry. So they came to us with a need to migrate out of their VMware environment for both their production and DR. So they had a mix of legacy systems and some more modern systems, and they had recently grown through a number of acquisitions, which had kind of led to a bit of infrastructure sprawl. So documentation was kind of hit or miss in some places, but they also had this additional challenge of having a very accelerated timeline. It was just over 60 days to where they needed to exit their platform and be running fully within the AWS cloud platform.
Okay, so what I captured is speed was needed,
Yes.
complexity was there,
Yep.
and then it was pretty large migration. So what strategy did you apply to plan on this?
Yeah, great question. So we do a lot of migrations, and we leverage a number of AWS tools. AWS Application Discovery Service is a great one. So we use that to do overall network discovery, help us with dependency mapping, and a lot of the migration wave planning and that kind of thing we use Migration Hub for. But we also leverage years of experience doing these kind of complex migrations from just about every platform out there to AWS Cloud.
That's great to know. So now that planning is done, now the time to actually migrate. What was the strategy to do the migration?
Yeah, great question. So due to this kind of really accelerated migration timeline,
Nice.
we mutually agreed to leverage a simplified migration strategy. So if you're familiar with the 6 R's, we had kind of slimmed those down to 3 strategies. So they were retire, rehost, and replatform. So let's talk about the retirement. So the customer's environment first. Looking here, we kind of broke it down into one of 4 buckets. So they had application VMs. This was a mix of some off-the-shelf software as well as a couple in-house developed pieces of software. They had a number of databases. The majority of them were supporting applications. They also had some BI and reporting databases. They had quite a bit of document data.
Okay.
And this was a mix of kind of user documentation, but also things like they had a document management system, and then they had some cold data storage. This was mostly data that they kept for compliance reasons. So as we kind of looked through, our 3 strategies here, as far as retirement, they looked through. They had some legacy applications that they were able to just quickly cut off the list. They'd been running for a while. No one was really using them. So there were probably 6 or 7 applications we were able to just instantly say, hey, this is going to be retired. From there, we kind of get into our rehost and replatform. So from rehost, our application VMs, went to Amazon EC2. So that was a little bit more of a lift and shift. Databases, however, we employed 2 different strategies. So in this hybrid strategy, the legacy databases, or things that were a little more specialized, maybe came with some commercial off-the-shelf software, those also were moved to EC2. For some of the things that they developed themselves and other applications where it was supported, which was really most of their production environment, we moved these over to Amazon RDS. So they were able to leverage a lot of the operational efficiencies of using RDS as a platform. From there, documents. So this was, for the most part, user documents went over to FSX. For the stuff that was accessed all the time, as well as the things out of their document management system. But we also had some archive data that we were able to leverage S3 to provide a significantly reduced cost, but still give users access through a file gateway in a way that they were comfortable with. And then finally, on the cold storage side, this all went into S3. So there were a number of tiers we were able to utilize. Glacier was a great place, a very, very cost-effective way to take a lot of this old archive data and retain it without it costing a lot of money.
So that's great to know, like you are using multiple tiers of S3,
Absolutely.
and then you are also using managed service like Amazon RDS. So what was the cost optimization we are talking here? And I also heard retirement, right? Like there were a few legacy applications got retired. So did you see any cost optimization coming through this cycle?
Yeah, we definitely did, and we also employed some strategies around reserved instances and savings plans, and we did some server right sizing as we were doing the migration. As part of that initial evaluation process, when they had a number of things in their environment that were kind of built oversized, just because of the way they were utilizing hardware before. So we were also able to do a lot of that right sizing step during the migration.
Yeah, plus the operational heavy lift, like using a managed service like RDS, I'm hoping operational side of cost optimization comes in the play.
Absolutely,
as well.
absolutely.
Okay. And to the next question, which I had something similar, like how did you enable the customer to operate in AWS?
Yeah. Their teams were very experienced with VMware, but they were kind of new to cloud, new to AWS. Mm-hmm. So one of the strategies that we employed actually with a fair number of our customers is using this our managed services to co-manage the environment with them. So this removes a lot of the operational load from their teams, all the day-to-day care and feeding of the environment. So that'll frees up time for their team to initially focus on training and upskilling on AWS and really learning all about the things that AWS Cloud has to offer. So, as they kind of learn and upskill, customers will frequently take on some tasks, but what we found is they see a lot of value in continuing that managed services option because it allows them a lot more agility. Mm-hmm. They're much more quickly able to respond to business needs, get involved in strategic initiatives because they've really freed up quite a bit of time offloading things like backups and patching, monitoring of the environment, OS troubleshooting and those types of things.
Yeah, and plus it also set them success for the long term, I see.
Absolutely. It's a partnership, and we really keep these partner type relationships with our customers, throughout the entire. I'll restart that. We really do see customers continue to leverage our managed services long term. They see a lot of value in that partnership and helping them really stay on top of the newest trends. And as they go through their phase 2 modernization journey, we're there to assist them along the way.
Oh, actually, I was wanting to touch on the modernization. So how do you foresee the modernization journey? In this case, it was very tight timeline, so I understand the velocity was needed. But how do you connect with the modernization?
Yeah, we did kind of a fast follow with a few of their internal applications to modernize into a mix of serverless with Lambda, as well as some containerized pieces. So they have a couple applications they've gone through that. There are a number of additional ones that we're kind of working through right now to see exactly where those should land from an architecture perspective. But we were able to hit this very tight migration timeline of just over 60 days and are now kind of on that phase 2 of modernization into the broad list of services that AWS has to offer.
That's great to know. Yeah, I mean, in this case, definitely the speed was needed. So it totally makes sense to kind of do the migration and then the modernization plan. Mike, thanks a lot for sharing this customer migration story and the outcomes you were able to bring to them.
Yeah. Outcomes are a huge focus for us at Effectual, and that's what we're always aligning to and tying back to is what are the business outcomes that the customer needs. So it's been great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us today.